Hello, welcome back to Out on the Line podcast. I am Jeff with my co-host, as always, Alex. Alex, how you doing this week?
Jeff, I got a question for you.
Okay.
What do they call an ankle monitor in Boston?
An accessory.
An Irish Rolex. Hi, welcome to the show, everybody.
Yeah.
You like that?
I do. I'm going to bring that one to work. I'm known for my dad jokes at work, so I'm going to definitely bring that one.
You're the belle of the ball, buddy.
Yeah. Well, Alex, I'm going to give you a chance. Why don't you tell the people what we got going on this week?
We are doing the latest, the 6th full-length LP from Young the Giant. It's Victory Garden. So for me, Young the Giant kind of falls into that category of what I would call Parks and Rec era indie pop.
Okay.
And like indie rock. I would say it's kind of on par with stuff like maybe not quality wise, but in terms of being contemporaries. You have Of Monsters and Men. You have The Head and the Heart, which is making slightly different music.
Mm-hmm.
The Lumineers are doing Stomp Clap Hey, but they're kind of in that same milieu. Like it's anything that you see being used in a poignant moment in an episode of Parks and Recreation circa 2010, 2011, what have you. That kind of music. And at the time, it was very easy to be cynical about stuff like Vampire Weekend is another good example.
Mm-hmm.
It was very easy to be cynical about hipster shit because at that point, hipster culture was kind of like, at this point, not a total joke, but it was starting to tip over. Like the end, it was kind of the we're getting real close to the tipping point with this kind of stuff. So that music just felt like incredibly unfashionable to me for a while. But going back in subsequent years and meeting friends with like different musical tastes who are like strongly encouraging me to go back and check this out. And turns out things like Vampire Weekend and Young the Giant, I wouldn't call them world beaters, but there's a lot there if you just kind of like go back and let yourself enjoy it and don't be cynical about it. So what was your familiarity with them going into this?
So for a long time, I did not realize that Young the Giant and Walk the Moon were different bands.
Oh,
so
yes.
Every time I heard that song, Shut Up and Dance by Walk the Moon, I had associated it with Young the Giant. And then once I realized that they were separate, see, I considered Young the Giant, after I realized they were different, like they had that song Cough Syrup. They had a couple others that were like massive. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing them. And like every Target you walked into, it's like they were just one of those bands that was very ubiquitous when the indie scene really kind of blew up. And I think Young the Giant was probably among the most popular of those bands. They were kind of like a figurehead of that scene. Once I realized they were separate, because I hate that Shut Up and Dance song, but once I realized what songs were Young the Giant, what songs were Walk the Moon, I realized that the Young the Giant ones were the ones that I actually liked. Now, I don't know that I would have gone out and bought an album or gone out of my way to like pick them out to listen to on Spotify, but it was ones that I didn't mind hearing, in retail stores around the world. You know what I mean? So doing this album, I was very interested to, I guess, get a full experience of them rather than just, their song in line with 15 others in whatever place I was in, or if I was driving and hearing it on the radio. And I think it's always kind of interesting to look at these bands that were like very popular at one point with a very specific scene in an album that they made, a decade later, 15 years later, whatever, after they've been in that popularity, and kind of see what they've turned into. So I think this album like really seemed very different than what I kind of associated their sound to be. But the lead singer's voice, and of course I don't have it pulled up here, but the lead singer's voice is very distinctive. And I think that's always a separator for these bands and like what makes them unique. Like Vampire Weekend had their very specific sound. And what's the guy, Ezra something or other, that's the lead singer, Vampire. Yeah. So he, he's got a very specific voice that what songs are his. So I think there's certain bands that separate themselves, and when they can do and continue to make albums years and years later, I think it shows that they weren't just of the moment. They weren't selling out to make that music. They just happened to be in the slipstream when their style of music was popular, and they happened to just kind of hit it big at that point. So this album, Victory Garden, they right off the bat they say Victory Garden. I think it's literally the first words on the album, and I wonder if they were, when they were going to name the album, they were just like, yeah, just call it that.
Yeah, fuck it. Yeah. Also, I would like to point out that Young the Giant is also not Cage the Elephant.
So Cage the Elephant, I will say Cage the Elephant is probably the best of any of those bands. Cage the Elephant fucks.
Yeah. I really enjoy Cage the Elephant. I was just piggybacking on the of Monsters and Men thing.
Yeah.
But I agree with you in your assessment that Samir Gadia, I don't know how he pronounces his last name, lead singer, it is really what sets it apart, because as much as I think Ezra Koenig's voice really suits Vampire Weekend, I don't think you would lose the whole plot if you pulled him out of it and plugged someone else in. I don't like the music of Elvis Costello would sound weird coming out of anyone but Elvis Costello or Squeeze, because he wrote a bunch of stuff with and for them. So there are just certain things where like the voice is the association, and to that end, for Young the Giant, not that the other musicians are like any slouch, but Samir's voice is the thing. It really is clearly the best instrument and the feature of what they're doing. It's so like, there are times where like Noah Khan kind of reminds me of it. I don't think he necessarily has the same range or clarity, but like it's like a fucking bell. Samir Gadia just like starts going, and there weren't enough opportunities to open up vocally on this album for my liking. And like he doesn't go not like the song Apartment from their self-titled album. He doesn't like open up on that, and it's still a great song because of all the elements that kind of make it groove. And like obviously like his vocal contributions are great, but he's not just like screaming to high heavens the entire time. But it does feel like he didn't get as many opportunities to kind of show up and show out on this one. So I don't know. Do you want to just kind of jump in? Did you have any favorite songs off this?
So I did have a couple of favorite songs, actually, if we want to use that as a kicking off point. So it was kind of a block of them. So like Mona Lisa, I thought was great because it was the most different, I think, versus the rest of the songs on the album. I almost had like a little bit like a bluesier kind of feel to it, just a little bit more subdued. Because I do think part of the part of the thing with his voice is, I think on this album versus like the previous songs, especially like I remember the song My Body by them, like that was one where that song pops, like that song goes, and I think is a great example of what he can do vocally. I feel like it was very, I don't want to say one note because it makes it sound like I didn't enjoy the album all the way through, but it was like very much like it was like one volume that he had. It was like always the same. And while it sounds very good, it ended up being, no matter how like different lyrically the songs might have been, how different musically the songs might have been, that part kind of stayed the same for me throughout this album. And it was short enough that it didn't hurt that bad. I didn't feel like I was stuck in anything. But really to me, Mona Lisa, I think, was my favorite. And then really on through the end of the album, I really liked Life is a Long Goodbye. It almost gave me that like Cat Stevens, You're Young, and I can't remember what the name of the goddamn song is, but it's like one of his most famous songs. But it's like that slow piano intro, I feel like that was the song where his voice could shine the most because there was less going on behind it. And I don't know if I would have wanted that throughout the whole album, but I think I wanted more variety overall.
It's interesting because I agree there were certain tendencies towards sameness that I saw mostly in the production. To me, it felt like on almost all these songs, everything was not flat, but it was side by side by side by side by side.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of depth, and there wasn't a lot of like exploration of levels and dynamics and stuff like that. that was that after a while, once it became obvious, I kept keying in on it because there's a version I really love Already There because I just love the vocal part. Like that's one of those moments where he kind of gets to show you what he's made of. That to me, like if you had just pulled it back in the mix just a hair and thrown just like a hair of reverb on it. He doesn't need it, but just a hair to make it a little different. It's like you said, the variety. To me, the variety would have been best served in the production because I think a lot of the songs, particularly the first four, kind of all felt distinct from one another, and I like immediately keyed in on like why I like them and why they're working. Bitter Fruit is such a jam. It reminds me of My Body. But then you get to like I'm looking at the track listing and like it dips for me at Ships Passing and This Too Shall Pass. This Too Shall Pass lyrically interesting. Musically, I wasn't nuts about it. Business picks back up with Mona Lisa. God is Witness is decent. And then Are You With Me? I'm not into. The Garden is decent. Life is a Long Goodbye is a great idea. It's not necessarily the most fulfilling song. So it never really sagged, but there were kind of these blips of, there were these moments of real inspiration. And then there were these blips where it was like, this doesn't feel as exciting as everything else you've given me. Like after the first four songs, I'm like, holy shit, if this whole album's like this, I'm going to be in heaven. To then get these little pockets where we kind of like stutter step just a tiny bit. But more than the songwriting, it came through in the production for me where that kind of, I don't want to call it flatness, but we'll say not flat sounding, but a flat line, like a horizontally flat line with the mixing. That for me is where it became a problem.
And I think, we're getting towards to one of the points that I just kept coming back to. And once I kind of realized this about this album is there weren't a lot of points of differentiation. And I think it has to do with the mixing. I think it has to do with that production. This is a band that, obviously I haven't heard all of their music, but of what I've heard, like the choruses build and pop. Like there is a huge difference between the chorus sections and then the chorus just is huge. It like feels like you could fill a stadium. And I kept waiting for those moments on this album. And while the choruses weren't bad, it's not like I disenjoyed anything on there. It just, in those moments where I felt like it could have taken that next step and it could have like really sold itself as this big bombastic production, it just didn't do it. And maybe that was the point for them. And maybe there's plenty of people out there that are going to enjoy the way that they did this. But I felt like it was just overall a lot of missed opportunities throughout this album. There was nothing that I actively didn't like. I thought everything was fairly well produced overall, but it's like there were some opportunities for better differentiation between those chorus moments and those verse moments. And I think if it was lyrically stronger, I think that you'd have less of a criticism about that. But because there was just something just didn't quite get to the levels that I needed it to get to. And with this being a genre of music that I'm not like super into, I've never like minded this kind of stuff. Like it's on the radio all the time. If you hated this, I'd probably kill myself by now. Just with how much you have to hear it. But it really, those points, and I think those first four songs, like while they're pretty good, what I wished I got out of them were those big moments, and I just feel like we missed out on that.
See, and that's the thing, when you get a song like Bitter Fruit, what does Young the Giant do really well? Never seen them live, but their music just lends itself to anthemic. I saw Vampire Weekend live, and that is very much a band that's meant to be experienced live. The energy is just like completely different. These songs that are kind of like, it could come off as kind of like, again, hipster and twee. When you see them live, you're like, oh, they rock. Like this really is like, it's good studio music. It's great live music. It was a great show. I would have to imagine, because of the way that these songs are structured, like imagine being at a concert and you're all just bouncing up and down while Bitter Fruit is going. Anthemic, like that was the stuff that really, really hooked me. And then there were these like more introspective moments that wasn't like a total crash down to earth, but steered very hard into the rock direction, which makes sense because the producer on this is a guy named Brendan O'Brien, who's worked with our
Mhm.
old pal, The Boss, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and he like pushed them into this live band energy direction, which, you know, I like in theory, but there were moments where I think maybe that instinct detracted from sort of the more like whimsical moments. Like though there were some moments that were like too grounded in rock instrumentation to be like playful and different, like I know Young the Giant music to be, or to
Mhm.
even be anthemic. It just felt a little too clean and kind of sanded off some of the fun edges. Again, it was really only on the songs that I wasn't super into where I noticed that feeling, because I'm like, I don't see myself, bouncing up and down, screaming this at one of their shows. And, that's my metric. It doesn't necessarily have to be theirs, but especially as an album that they are on record as saying was like a back to basics, back to our roots kind of thing. The moments where it shares its DNA with Young the Giant, the first album, or Mirror Mirror, which came out in like 2018. The moments where like like the old time DNA was poking out were the most satisfying moments. And again, there are some bands where that's a crutch, or some bands where you can't go home again. But then you get stuff like going back to that Cure album we did a couple years ago,
Mhm.
that holds up really well on subsequent listens. Like I kind of didn't really give it all of its flowers at the time. It really holds up. And
Yeah.
it's the Cure doing the Cure and just like pulling new tricks out of the bag. But with Young the Giant, it just felt like if the goal is to do like a back to basics album, they succeeded 3/4 of the way. If the idea was to push it, like steer into your live band, like Brook and the Bluff, was to steer into the sound and the feeling of experiencing it live. The irony is that those rock oriented songs put a distance between me and them. And the more anthemic ones that sound more traditional, I'm like, this is home.
Yeah. And I will say, Brandon O'Brien, as soon as you mentioned that name, I remembered. I was like, well, he is responsible for some of the worst Bruce Springsteen albums ever.
Ah,
So he did The Rising, which was okay. Like The Rising, because of the song The Rising, gets a lot better credit than it really deserves, because the rest of the album is not very good.
yeah.
Devils and Dust is more associated with the kind of live performance, like the VH1 Storytellers type thing that Springsteen did with that. He did the Magic album. That album fucks. I'll give him credit for that, because that album absolutely fucks. Radio Nowhere is one of the best Bruce Springsteen songs ever written.
Yes.
Girls in Their Summer Clothes, one of the most classic Bruce Springsteen songs ever written. But he also did Working on a Dream, which might be the single worst Bruce Springsteen album ever produced. And then he also did the High Hopes, like the covers and compilation album. To me, I think there is the idea that they wanted to like go back to basics. I feel like they missed the mark on it. And maybe like you're saying, they got 3/4 of the way there, halfway there, whatever. But those moments, like what I always associated Young the Giant with being, is that like those big anthemic moments. And I feel like I really didn't get any. So the reason I liked Mona Lisa is because it was very far away from that. Like I feel like that song wasn't trying to be that. And therefore I really liked it, because it was very different than kind of the rest of the album had to offer. Life is a Long Goodbye was a much slower song, and lyrically, while it wasn't that strong, the vibe of it was just much different. And I feel like because they weren't reaching for something that they weren't getting to, it landed a lot better for me. I feel like those moments where the choruses like just felt like we were about to build into something great, and then it just kind of stayed flat. It kind of stayed right where the verse was as far as what the energy felt like it was going to be. To me, it just, again, I don't know that I'd mind hearing any of these songs over again, but I don't know that I'd go out of my way to hear any of them over again.
Yeah, there are some that I think fit snugly into the, like, if you're creating a set list of songs that you would love to hear if you saw them live, There are a couple I would sneak on. Like, again, I cannot stress how much I really enjoyed Bitter Fruit, because the chorus on that is Anthem City. Everybody's screaming it together. I see our old pal Tanner. Maybe he's like 10 or 18 beers deep and
Yeah.
just sweating in the summer heat, going nuts on the waterfront in Burlington. Like, I see the picture so clearly. And then, not that to say that like they got 3/4 of the way there feels mean, but I think it's accurate, because for me, the angle I was coming at it with was I want more of Cough Syrup, My Body. The American Bollywood album they did in like 2022, I think, was their album before this. Very good, very different. So for them to be like, okay, we're going back to do the old stuff, and we're kind of trying to like recapture that. The whole band fucked off for Joshua Tree together, and they were like, we're going to live together, take meals together, work on this music, and like it's going to be, we are going to come together as one cohesive unit and get back to basics and just build this thing. And you see the craftsmanship, you see the really good ideas, and then you see the ones that are just missing that something extra, and they steer a little too hard into a more mannered kind of rock and roll, which takes some of the Young the Giant stamp off of it, which is not the point. Like, I don't want something that anybody could do. I want something that's uniquely theirs. And so I got that with like the first 4 songs, and then like kind of a sub tier with like Mona Lisa and stuff like that. So overall, positive about it, enjoyed it. With the songs that didn't hit and with some of the production issues, I feel like I'm gonna go safely 6.5 out of 10.
Okay, I mean we're almost right there, because this one was a 6 out of 10 all the way for me. I think it was slightly above a passing grade, which I consider a 5. Anything below a 5, I think, is something I will actively avoid listening to ever again. Anything 5 and up, I'm like, yeah, if it comes on the radio, I'm good. It's the 8s, 9s, and 10s that I'm like, yeah, I'll go out of my way to listen to this again. 6 feels right for me on this one, because there was no point where I was like, I don't like this at all. But it just felt like it had an opportunity to do something a lot better and just didn't quite get there.
Yeah, and maybe it was just ideas of theirs that didn't like translate all the way, and hard to know exactly what the issue was. But again, it might sound kind of salty to be like 6 and 6.5. I think they're fair passing grades, and like you said, it has to be below a 5 to be like avoid at all costs. I just think if the production isn't all the way there, and the interest in your songs is not all the way there, that's like 2 fairly damning things. Like, there's 11 songs on the album. I liked 6 of them. So that's good. That's like a majority, but
Barely. Yeah.
So
Barely. Well, I know we haven't talked about Young the Giant in the past, Alex, but we have talked about a lot of other bands. And where can people find us talking about all those other bands?
Do you want to return to a simpler time? A time when music podcasts really felt like the last bastion of truth and artistic integrity. Like, what's happened to Fantano? You know what I mean? Like, is it gauche to bring up another critic that's like so much bigger than you? Like, you're the little guy punching up. And hey, I got no beef with him. I have lots of creepy bald friends. But what has he turned into? Hypercritical of so many people, yet unable to admit his own faults. It detracts from the integrity of the music criticism, which, as we know, is more important than music itself. Okay? These artists, they're just, cranking out stuff. Feed us the shit, manja. Little puppets that you dress up and make do pretty songs, okay? It pales in comparison to the contributions of the music critic. And you can just call yourself a music critic. You literally do not need a single stinking credential. And we sure don't have them at youtube.com/C/out on that line. Folks, it's been what, 6-7 years? Like, those are our credentials, badges.
6,
We don't need 'em.
7.
Yo, 6-7, see, we're still relevant. We know what the young kids like. So, like, we also know what the, like, 60-year-old Australians like. We've pretty much got everybody pegged here. And we've created a comfortable space where y'all can come together and exchange a free flow of ideas in the comments on our videos. You can show your support by hitting the thumbs up. You know you want to. Just forget about the other one. It's not even an option. You just hit the thumbs up to like the video. You click the bell to turn notifications on so that you always know when we've come up with something new here. And for God's sake, subscribe and consider hyping the video. That's a new feature. If you guys all got together and hyped it, maybe we would be like 917th in the world. Who knows? We can try. So we encourage you to go back through all of our old content, find something you love, tell us what it is, tell us what you want more of. We're in the business of you, folks, okay? Like, there's two things we do well: music criticism and pandering. And you will learn about that at youtube.com/C/out on that line. Also now on Spotify.
Music criticism and pandering. I like that.
Yeah, baby.
That is our tagline. And folks, until next time.